What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? As you know, we're on today talking about to a bunch of young preachers, trying to get our perspective on what's going on in the world, church, the next generation. We're so glad that you guys can tune in to be with us during this time. As always, please do us a favor and hit that share button and let people know that we're on. Oh, also, if you guys can, I know y'all are young, so y'all got your phones in front of y'all. Can you
Right.
can you share, right? Can you share this too on your platforms?
We'll do it.
Absolutely. Hey, Carlene, just to let people know that we are on today. I'm excited about this panel tonight and who we have on. I guess the one thing that's good about this particular pandemic, even though I don't like the whole sickness and everything, is it gives opportunity to connect with different people.
Yeah.
Pastor Danielle and I are like an hour away, and this is the first time ever like meeting her virtually. But I see her post all the time. That's why I was like, I got to get her on. She posts some really provocative information. So, again, y'all please share. Let us know. Let everybody know we're on to join us tonight. We might be able to take some questions too and all that. So for those that don't know, we got people, well, for all the three of you guys, we got people that join us from London, Australia, Boston, a whole bunch of other places. So we might take some questions and shout some folk out. They're coming on now. All right, and while people are coming on, why don't we do some introductions? Of course, I'm Pastor Nick Smith, executive pastor here at Bethany Baptist Church in Lindenwold, New Jersey, and we'll work our way over to Reverend Talifaro and work our way around. Just say who you are, church name, and the pastor and all that good stuff. Y'all grew up in church. Y'all know how to do
this. First, giving honor to God, who's the head of my life. Daryl Talifaro, Nashville, Tennessee, with Mount Zion Baptist Church under the leadership of Bishop Joseph W. Walker III.
Cool. Reverend Brown?
Reverend Dr. Danielle Brown. I'm the pastor of church life at Cathedral International, the historic Second Baptist Church of Perth Amboy, New Jersey. I serve under the leadership of Bishop Donald Hillier Jr.
Cool. Hey, Mario.
Awesome. Well, glad to be back and glad to be with these esteemed panelists. And my coffee hasn't kicked in yet, so my words are slurred. But Mario Hood, Orlando, Florida, served as the Next Gen pastor and media director underneath Bishop Mark Sharona. And just glad to be back with you, Pastor Nick, and everybody on this panel tonight.
Good. So that's everybody, and we're going to talk about some serious stuff, have some light stuff. I grew up in church, but I like to have fun too, so we can laugh a little bit, talk about some serious stuff. We're all pretty much around the same age group, so well, I might be the oldest one on me. I'm not sure. well, no, Daryl, you're older than I am. Never mind. You're the senior head of the group, I think.
You said what now?
I think you're older than me. I think you're the senior head of the group.
What month were you born?
I'm November 28th. I'll be 39 in November.
Yeah, I'm the senior of the group. Yeah. I'm April, so yeah, I'm the senior.
Yeah, my man. Happy belated birthday.
Appreciate it.
And we don't ask women. Not asking women their age still a thing that you're not supposed to do. You muted yourself. Oh, you got to unmute yourself, Rev.
I said, that's right.
You're a smart man. You're smart.
I didn't even look down her way. I was like, let's just leave it right here with us. So thank you guys for coming on, and we want to get started. Just have some discussions about some things, and we got to talk about what's going on in the climate, I guess. This wasn't on the subject roster, but I guess we got to talk about it since it's right there in the news. It continues to amaze me how patriotism mixes with Christianity with certain groups of people so intensely, where it feels like if you're attacking a major issue, it's like you're attacking their whole entire nation, the whole entire world. And my son is 7 years old, and it disheartens me that I have to have a conversation with him that I didn't think I would have to make. The one that my mom and them gave me, this is what you do when you're pulled over, this is what you do, so on and so on. So I kind of thought, like, you know what, by the time he turns 18, I won't need to do that. But now at this point in time, and my son has special needs too.
Okay.
If knowing how to translate the information to him, and quite frankly, it disturbs me to know that, you know, my son, I mean, I have to have this conversation with him again. It almost seems like it just keeps coming full circle. And I didn't want to watch the tape, but I did. I kind of skipped past some parts. I couldn't watch the whole thing because it just, you know, it was messing with me too much. What do you guys think about what's going on? And what should our response be as a church, as people, as it relates to what's going on? You good? You're right. Go ahead, Pastor Terrell.
Well, I think that our response should be an active response. You know, we have to do more than just pray about this. The church is called to be the house of prayer, but we also have to be a house of action. We also have to get out and provide not just rhetoric from the pulpit, but we also have to provide resources for individuals to understand their rights and understand what's happening around them. So often we specialize in the response versus being proactive, you know, so that we know how to do what it is that we need to do in the fell clutch of circumstance. So we have to do more than just pray about it. We've got to put action behind our words.
Yeah, I think I agree that we can't just, you know, the Bible tells us that faith without works is dead. I think inherent to Christian faith and particularly the practice of that among African Americans, we don't have the luxury of not doing justice work all the time, right? But then there are moments like this where the tensions and the pressure and the just the way that our system is creates more intense circumstances and all of that. And I think that we have to continue, especially in these moments, to speak truth to power, to not back down, not kind of, you know, water down in the same way we don't want to water down the gospel. We also cannot water down truth. Well, let me say, because I don't separate justice work from gospel work. Right. It's the same thing. And so we can't water it down. And I think that it's important that in these moments that preachers and churches are not silent, that we speak up and speak out. That's the only way that things are going to change, if they ever will.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree 200% with both of them. You know, I think particularly in America, we have separated theology from action, and it's only an intellectual thing.
Right. And
even in saying that, we don't have a full theology or understanding of theology when it comes particularly to racial issues and justice issues, because we have so politicized everything when it comes to those issues. And I think we forget, just as both of them just said, that Jesus didn't just speak words, his actions became theology. Right. And so the way he treated people changed the way they thought about God. And so when he's interacting with the Samaritan woman, when he's interacting with quote unquote sinners who the religious leaders didn't want to be around, Jesus was showing us in an active way that we can't just talk about it, we got to be about it. And I think in this moment, especially, you know, for African Americans and people that are in the minority, like you said, we live it every day. And so for the rest of Christianity needs to also begin to live it out. in whatever way that looks like for them. But making a post is great, but what are we going to do offline to change the culture?
Right. And I think that's interesting because all throughout, American history, and as it relates to civil rights, you saw the church was at the forefront of most of the major changes. Now, I could be wrong here. Y'all help me out here. It seems like to me the church is no longer at the forefront of our social justice or civil rights movement. They're coming up from other ways, and sometimes I wonder how that looks on this younger generation coming up. Where before you can look at and say, this church, this preacher, these preachers were helping to lead a major cause. I think the church, as you guys are saying, does a disservice by getting caught up in the hoopla of what we do. And like you said, the intellectual part, the tweeting, we put a tweet out about it, but what are we doing grassroots to fix this? And sometimes, I brought all of us here because we're all, we kind of know the language of the culture being the age group that we're in. Where do you guys feel like the church at large needs to step up and do? Because again, this is disheartening that for the first time, in my eyes, I could be wrong here, the church is not at the forefront leading the cause and championing civil rights for people.
I think by and large, you made a interesting reference to the days of old as relates to the church being the epicenter, if you will, of the civil rights movement. And that was part and parcel because ministers and leaders were viewed as role models. These were individuals who were viewed as, if I can't go to anyone else, I can go to the preacher, because the preacher was deemed to be the smartest person in the community during that time. Yeah. Preachers and doctors and lawyers. And I believe that instead of the church just prophesying today, we've got to fulfill the prophecy of old. What I mean by that is we have to now be those leaders that our grandfather was or our great grandfather was. And we have to now don't just talk about it, but we have to be about it. One of the issues that I believe is that the reason why the church is sitting silently like statues in the sanctuary is because there's such a connectivity to the government. Our grants are funded by the government. There's a connection to the government on so many levels that we're afraid to speak out. We're afraid to speak truth to power. Now, some churches, like our church, we don't get government grants. And my pastor doesn't have a problem speaking out, but I think that it's time for a Martin to rise up. It's time for a Jesse to rise up. But we as the church have to stop looking outward for Martin. We have to stop looking outward for Jesse. We are the Martins. We are the Malcolms. We are the Jessies. We are the individuals that God has empowered to really galvanize the support of our constituents who happen to be our members of our churches, to really say, this is what we need to do in order to effect change in our community. So often we hide, I believe, behind the gospel as opposed to using the gospel. What is the gospel? It's the evangelion. It is the good news. How can we hear good news amid this bad news of George Floyd? What is the good news in all of this? Well, many churches will get up, they'll say a sound bite, and then they'll move forward. But the good news is that as a church, we're not just going to talk to you for a brief 30 seconds about this, but we're going to equip your young people on how to deal with it. We're going to bring in law enforcement officers to show you various tactics on how to de-escalate a situation, different things of that nature. So we as the church, until we recognize that we are the church and we have to be the prophecy versus just prophesying, then we'll always be in a perpetual state of recovery versus the perpetual state of actualization.
Right. That's good.
I think, times are different. We pushed the rewind button 50, 60 years ago, and Black people were church people. There was a different relationship with the church and the Black community.
Yeah.
Fast forward, now Christian, right, is not the only thing that there is for Black people. We are of many faiths. And I think that in a lot of ways, right? So we talk about the church being behind in technology. I think that globally, right, the church is often behind on a lot of things. And that is the fact that Martin and Jesse's day have passed, right? And so because there's such a search for the next Martin or someone who fits that mold and does the work that way, we dismiss the fact that there are people who are doing this work every day, right? There are the Reverend Tracy Blackmans, the Willie Francois, who's here in New Jersey. There's many who are doing the work every day. So I don't like to necessarily broad stroke and say the church is not. Sure. I just think that we dismiss oftentimes the work that is being done because it does not look like what it looked like 50 years ago, right? So maybe there's not one figure of a movement, right? Because we know that the work wasn't just Dr. King, but there was a whole lot of people who may not have been visible who were doing the work, right? And then there was a face of the work, right. And maybe it's not going to look that way. And I think that as the church, we've got to be okay with it not looking that way. We've got to be okay even with the idea that maybe the Black church won't be the center in the same way. But maybe what the Black church does is partner with our Muslim brothers and sisters, partner with the community and other stakeholders, right? So that together we can do this work. And I think that we shoot ourselves in the foot when we have this expectation that this work of justice is just going to be or return to being the pulpit only. If that makes, that's what I'm saying. That we've got to be willing to go beyond what is comfortable for us so that we can evoke change in the communities around us. So then that's the other thing, is that maybe in many instances, we have been so focused on being global, right, that we forgot the real work of justice is happening right in our backyards. Within 10 and 15, when is the last time you had a conversation with the mayor of your city? Me and my mayor, Will Diaz, we were texting this morning, right? About what's happening, right? When are you having conversations with your elected officials and with your congregations, even to tell them like, hey, these are the things that are coming down the pike. I won't tell you who to vote for, but you need to be aware, right, of these issues and then take a stand, understanding that you cannot be afraid. You can't do the work of justice and be afraid of what backlash may be, Yeah,
that's good.
Well, I think the doctor just covered everything. And so, I mean, the only thing that I would add is just my pastor, Bishop Schroner, always says that the prophetic always speaks against the abuse of power. Right. And I think, especially in our tribes, Pentecostal charismatics, for the last, 40, 50 years, we've really focused on the charismata, the charismatic expression of the prophetic, words of knowledge, reading somebody's mail, or whatever we want to call it. But I think what we have lost is that prophetic voice in which speaks against the abuse of power, that speaks against the wrongs in the world. And if you put everything that they just said together, like, we need to recapture that. And maybe it's not just one figurehead, but maybe that's the Spirit anointing us in a new Pentecost, that everybody needs to take up that prophetic voice in order to affect change, and talk to your local people and talk to the people that's in your congregation. We have a very multicultural church, very ethnic, diverse church. And I remember a couple years ago when this very same thing happened again. And, a young man was screaming, "I can't breathe." And Bishop on Tuesday nights for about 4 weeks in a row literally just didn't preach. We just had conversations. They were tough. They were hard. But it's those conversations that need to be had. And moving forward, it's just not a one-time thing. It is a thing that needs to happen over and over and over again. And so if the church doesn't model it, then the culture is not going to care. And I think, we can't sit back and not be that prophetic voice anymore.
Yeah, that's true. You brought up something. All your thoughts are great. I'm so glad y'all came on. Y'all smart. Pentecost. You brought up something, Mario. How can I say this without being Pentecost? I think we lowered it just to the charismatic experiences of, you got speaking tongues and you have like 5 praise breaks during the service, and but I think the power of Pentecost talked a lot about in Acts 2 was the transformation of people and the uniting together of all these different nationalities, all these different groups. And I think we miss that, focusing on the excitement of the day. And we call that power when, Lord have mercy, we actually had a good time, but what translate outside of the building? How many people got saved that day? Did we feed people that day? What transformations happened in those moments? And I think for years, we got so caught up in coming to church that we forgot about the stuff outside the church. That's all I'm really trying to get to. It became the place to come rather than come, right. I can go do something outside.
That's
and
good.
If there's one thing the pandemic is teaching us, when we can't come to church, it's really showing what we can do outside. So, let's kind of tear through that some more. Because to me, if your Christianity is only locked into the building, you're of none effect and no effect outside the world. You're doing this halfway in balance. We're treating it like a transaction rather than me empowering myself to be a mission. We were talking, Brother Mario's on, we were talking this Tuesday, the church is back on mission of evangelism, but why did we ever get off it? We're talking about calling us back to a mission field. I think we got so comfortable with people coming that now we're not a church-going culture anymore. And Reverend Brown, you said we're not a church-going culture anymore. Folk just don't feel the need to come anymore. The culture's changed. So they're not coming, so we got to go get them. And my hope that through this Pentecost experience, not only will we have our normal, quote unquote, celebrations, but what is that? How is that celebration translating outside these walls?
That's good.
And I would love to hear your thoughts on that also. So, some of y'all don't know me like that. That kind of grinds my gears. I grew up in church. I've been in church all my life. And like some of y'all may have or may have not been, but to me, it's not effective if it's only working in here and there's no fire inside this building.
Yeah, I'll go real quickly on that. And part of my dissertation that I'm writing is that very aspect, and that for so long, the church has thought that it controls and contains the Holy Spirit, when the Spirit is always moving inside the church and outside the church, from Genesis to Revelation. And especially in John 14 through 16, the farewell discourse, as it's called, talks about the roles and the functions of the Holy Spirit. And one of those is to convict the world and to show righteousness and to move in judgment, but also to be the comforter to those who are going to abide and be in Christ. And so I think just what you said, for a long time, we have had church, which is fine. I don't think any of us are saying that we can't do that. At the same time, Bishop, again, he has this message that he preached, and he talks about Rahab and talks about how she knew more than the Israelites about what God was doing than they even knew. And so he extrapolates that all the way out to the New Testament, that God is moving, whether that's with Cornelius, whether that's, in different cities, that I think it's an opportunity for us to wake up and see that the Spirit is moving in the world. And part of our duty and responsibility as Christians is to find out where the Spirit is moving and come and point people to say, that right there, that's happening, that's the Holy Spirit. That's Jesus. Let me tell you about it.
Good. Anybody else want to chime in?
I have really been thinking through Pentecost at the intersection of what is happening in our nation right now. And yesterday I had this thought that, beyond the speaking in tongues and the gathering, because we can't, is not healthy or safe to do that. Beyond that Pentecost has meaning beyond just the gathering, right? We like to lean hard on they were there on one accord, right? On one accord.
Right.
But we also have to understand that while they were present, right, the one accord was not absent of wrestling. Right. There's some crazy things that happened, right? They weren't, they're in this upper room, but what's happening around them is that they were essentially enemies of the state, right? People in high places were like, they stole that body. and so they were in this space. We've got to recognize, right? It wasn't just a cookout. It wasn't a, Memorial Day weekend.
Right.
So
and there was a wrestling that was going on in that upper room that was very much connected to the intersection of God's will for them and instruction and what was happening in culture, right? And so this Pentecost, I believe, draws us to that. But I was thinking, yesterday during the day that we really need this Pentecost because, and not for the gathering, not for the shouting, not for the speaking in tongues, but for the breathing. Right. We're looking at all year long, we have been robbed of breath, whether it is COVID and the government's negligent handling of that, whether it has been now watching an officer for 9 minutes put his foot on the neck of a Black man who was not resisting, right, and murder him on camera, as people are pleading, please stop, stolen breath. We need to breathe. And so we need Pentecost. But then last night, I was watching the news late. I decided to turn on the news at the end of the day. And then I saw Minneapolis on fire.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I said, Pentecost. Not that I'm condoning burning down buildings, and I have some theories about who was actually doing the burning down. That's not for this conversation. We can talk about
you saw that video, yeah.
But fire means something. And maybe in our country, we have to not be afraid to say that we need some things to be destroyed by fire. That in this Pentecost season, that the flames we saw on television could have been symbolic of a burning that we need nationwide. A burning that is the dismantling. We need the help of the Holy Ghost, right through here. Yeah. But maybe this burning down of a racist system that just won't quit. And then this feeling that allows us to call a thing what it is, right? As we're wrestling with this, that what good is the shouting? And I'm gonna tell y'all, I love shouting. Oh, yeah. I love that kind of church. Like I love the Pentecost Sunday, typical kind of church, right? I like to have it every Sunday, right? Right. But what good is all that if we can't call racism what it is? Right? If we can't call police brutality what it is, if we just want to relegate and say, oh, but it's a sin, and we're more Christian than we are Black, and all of those things, and just call for racial reconciliation, but not really deal with the issues. I pray that this Pentecost finds us having boldness and really being filled with the kind of Holy Spirit that empowers us to speak truth to power for real, no matter who the power is.
Right. That's good. Y'all dropping mics tonight. Come on, brother. You got something there?
I just say, man.
Man, that's good. So really, without kind of intersecting and bringing us into a younger generation of people that are coming up. When I started preaching at 16, when did y'all start preaching?
I started at 14. 14.
The Lord called me at 13. That was a bootleg.
I think I got saved at 18, maybe preached at 19. So I'm a latecomer to y'all experts.
but it's good because all of us got called at a young age, so we had that experience of coming through. And one of the things I really impress on our young people, without putting too much pressure on them, you don't have to wait until you're an adult to serve God, to be used by God, gifting wise. We were talking about Martin Luther King earlier. Most people, when you tell them like nobody thinks about him being, I think he was 34 when he did the I Have the Dream speech. He was 39 when he died, you know, in his late 20s when he started. Not even just him, you're Stokely Carmichaels, you're all these other people who stepped up. And one of my biggest prayers now is to raise up a group of young people. Now, especially, and Reverend Brown, you can speak to this some too, especially some young women, because one of my biggest concerns is that glass ceiling for women is still there, you know? And like, we got some great young women here that have some extraordinary gifts to them. We're cultivating those gifts so that they will understand that, you know, how to navigate this world. And I don't see the equality of men and women being a bad thing against the brothers. We need both voices in the world. So let's kind of talk about some next generation leadership, but also some leadership too of raising up some young women on the scene and giving them the space to grow and exercise their gift, because they're obviously gifted to do some great things. But we're talking about power structures. Some of the power structure, even in the church, has got to be made. There's got to be some adjustments made there too.
Yeah.
I remember when we started doing the female deacons. Here's what got me, y'all. Maybe y'all can help me out with this. When we started ordaining female deacons, said, look, we're doing deacons now as women. Taught on it, showed them in the Bible. Our greatest opposition did not come from the men in the church.
Came from the women.
Our greatest opposition came from some of the women in the church. And you would have thought, I would have thought the women would have been, Bishop was like, yo, we'd have thought the women would have been all for it. But I think while we're talking about breaking down structures outside, we got to break some structures up in here too. Age, gender, all those things. So kind of let's talk about that. And, you know, I don't want to make you a token Rev, but, you know, you're the only woman in the group. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think in the same way, in that theme of Pentecost, sexism is another thing that needs to burn. You know? Yep. And I think when we get to the place, it'll be beautiful when we get to the day when we are not gauging effectiveness or giftedness or anointing on whether you're male or female, right? That oh, she's gifted, but she's a woman, right? Or you know, she has education, but she's a woman, right? And so those things, or you know, that we acknowledge the differences, and I think that in our differences, you know, male and female, there is beauty in the differences. But when it comes to qualifying or determining effectiveness for ministry, when the day when we stop making that differentiation will be the day that we're you know, have made good progress, right? But in the meantime, I think that we can do those things in the spaces that we are in, right? Take an assessment, right? Are all of the women in an environment working harder, right? Are they showing up first and leaving last? And then are they getting the same opportunities at exposure, the same pulpit time? You know, oftentimes what happens is that women are working the hardest, but then get the least exposure, the least opportunities to be in what traditional leadership roles would be, particularly if you, for women who are like staff ministers or associate ministers, you know, in any given church, the women show up first and leave last, but they're the less likely to get the coveted, I say, right, opportunities, and not that they can't, but that, you know, they're just not often available to women. And so I think that we all, right, have to make assessments and constantly make sure that we are leveling up where those things are concerned. And then in addition to women, and my experience has been this, I have had men who have been incredibly encouraging to me along my journey. My pastor, my boss, has extended to me some incredible opportunities to lead and to have platform at the cathedral, which has also given way to opportunities beyond. But I've also had women. I haven't had the crazy experiences with women that some women say like, oh, women, no, I've had a really good village.
Good.
I have amazing friends who are women in ministry, a mentor who is a woman in ministry. But then my brothers in ministry have also been supportive of me. But they also hear me when I say things like, check that, or, when will you have so-and-so, or when you do your little thing, make sure that you add some women, and not so that the woman can be the token, so that they don't drag you on social media, but include women, because we are able and capable of speaking to issues and being used by God in the same way that the brothers, can. So I think that that's important. And then with young women, one thing that we do have to do, there was a conversation last night, and I wanted to cite the conversation. Dr. John Guns had a conversation on ageism, and one of the things that had come up was tax, and that young people that we end up having to pay tax, right? So we pay our dues, and then on top of dues is also tax. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that had come up was, but imagine being a woman, right? The tax that you pay on top of the tax after the dues, yeah. Right? When you're a woman. And so I think also making sure that we're not perpetuating that with women. So if the women in if the brothers in your congregation are ordained after a year or 3 years, the average time between licensing and ordination for the women should also, as a general rule, right, be similar. Particularly if these women are going and they're getting seminary degrees and things like that, they shouldn't still be sitting on the vine as licensed ministers. And then you have men who can come in and just get filled with the Holy Ghost on Pentecost Sunday. And they go from, ministry. I'm not saying, because y'all work, many of y'all work hard too, but just as an example, right? You have a woman with a whole D men and she's still a minister. And then the brothers come in and it's a different story. And so I think assessing the space that you're in, but it's important also for brothers to champion that cause. Right. Because it's not enough just for the women who are in the process to speak out, but the brothers who have been afforded male privilege in the church to use that male privilege to create spaces for greater equality for women as well.
Good. Now, Pastor Mary, I know you do a lot of work with the Gen Z crowd. I know you recommended a book. I still have to read the book. What are your thoughts on mentoring this Gen Z group? They're different.
Yeah.
I
think every generation is different. And at the same time, I think just because of human beings, we're all humans, there's some underlying tendencies that we all have. But specifically with Gen Z, it takes a lot more patience to walk with them, mainly because of the technology factor, which has exposed all of us, but especially young people. And again, I'm a champion for the next gen. And so what that means is the product that we have was created by somebody. And so we can't talk about the negative aspects of Gen Z or any generation without talking about the negative aspects of the parents.
Right.
So a lot of times we talk, man, we got it. Millennials, those millennials are horrible. The millennials, blah, blah, blah. Well, who raised the millennials? And so the same thing now comes with Gen Z. And so even though they are uniquely, we have to deal with them uniquely because of technology. One of the reasons is because parents allow their kids to be on technology a long time. And listen, I'm one of them. I have to do better. School is out, summer is here. It's like, go in your room, leave me alone. I don't want to deal with you. And so, but at the same time, and because of their exposure to technology, so the long way around, the answer is because of the exposure to technology, they think they're smarter than what they really are. And so it's called artificial maturity is what Tim Elmore calls it. And so when you're dealing with that, you have to be patient in order to break down the false assumptions that they think they know, and then show them, no, this is the way that it works better, not necessarily always right, because there may be 5 ways to get to the same point. And so when dealing with Gen Z, we have to understand that as leaders, it's going to require a little bit more patience. And then the other part of it is that it's going to require a lot of social skill development. I'm sure most of us, if you're like me, growing up, especially in the hood, you got kicked out of the house at 10 a.m. when the sun was out, and you were told to come back when the lights came back on.
Yep.
And so you grew up out, on your own, and you grew up, going through a bunch of stuff. And so you were socially constructed, and your character was developed very early on. Now we're dealing with kids that even when they graduate high school, they don't know how to write a check. When they graduate high school, simple things like talking to the opposite sex in a correct way, they don't know, because all they're hearing is from music, or all they're seeing is from TV shows.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of not just intellectual things that they have to be taught, but social and emotional things. And so if we don't bring that together holistically, then we're not going to be creating good leaders. We're not going to be creating a generation that's ready to step in and not have to pay triple tax in order to be in leadership now. And so those are some of the unique factors that we have to consider on top of everything else when it comes to developing leaders.
That's good. Daryl, you want to weigh in? You sitting back there chilling, bro.
Well, I mean, I think that, from what both of them have said, I think that, as men in leadership and men in ministry, we have to constantly be aware of the blinders that govern our leadership. We have to constantly be aware of those things that we're not aware of to ensure that we're not perpetuating a culture that is exclusive. We also have to, and pointing more toward the next generation, we also have to foster a spirit of authenticity so that individuals in the next generation would want to see us and say, wow, I want to do that. Yeah, I can bounce the ball on a wooden court. Yeah, I can walk in on Wall Street and crunch numbers. Yeah, I can walk in a court and advocate for people's rights, but I want to preach the gospel. And I want to preach the gospel not just because of what I see on Sunday, but how I want to preach the gospel because I see how this person lives and treats his or her family Monday through Saturday.
Good.
I believe that we have to do that. I also believe that we have to foster, as leaders, transformational leadership and not just transactional leadership. Once we really foster transformational leadership versus transactional leadership, that's when I believe that you'll see this new generation saying, tell me about what you do. Tell me about how I can get involved in youth ministry and then work my way up to college ministry and then work my way up to young adult ministry and then men's ministry and women's ministry and then finally be over pastoral care or be the executive pastor and then be the senior pastor, whatever. I believe that it's up to us to not just talk about it, but to model the way so that individuals can see that what we preach about is not something that's just words in our mouth, but it's actions that we live out, that we really try to implement what Jesus is saying, not just, what we think sounds good.
You're right. You're right, because they're growing up in the reality TV world, even though it's really not reality TV. It's still scripted.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But they desire the authenticity. It's almost like what you're saying, transactional. The first thing I thought of was a shepherd that only wants the sheep for the wool. And that's it. Rather than loving the sheep for who they are and allowing the wool to generate for them, but they have a care for their sheep. And to me, actually, it worked for our generation. We were younger, but this one, the more high technology they are, technologically inclined they are, the more high touch they need.
Yeah.
Technology, as great as it is messing with the studies have shown it, messing with our emotional state, our mental health is going up due to the disconnect of the human touch. And I think this generation, even though, their whole thing is don't call me, text me, or Snapchat me, or whatever. They need that high touch and they desire it. So like I don't know about y'all, but the kids down here, they walk around and half speak sometimes. And not all of them. Some of them are real nice, but they're still caught up in their phones. They don't know how to respond and actually have a conversation. They can text you for an hour, but can't talk to you in person for more than 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. It almost seems like to me, I go in overdrive of talking, sharing, because that seems to win over the trust more. And the more technology becomes more innovative, the more high touch we need to be. And it's crazy you have to tell shepherds that shepherds should like sheep. Shepherds smell like sheep. I can't trust a shepherd that doesn't smell like sheep. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The shepherds with the sheep, among the sheep. Mm-hmm. Not just whistling to the office, but people that the shepherd, they can relate to their shepherd. They can still maintain the difference. But I think ministry in the future, talking about ministry for the next wave, is going to have to intentionally be high touch. And you're noticing a lot of people are going to places where the high touch community vibe is there. Yeah. They go to a big church, word is great, worship is great, but if they don't feel connected, they're out.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, about the necessity for this generation. As disconnected as they're becoming, you're starting to see the need for connection. Community is huge for this group.
Right.
So let's kind of play with that a little bit more. And I'd love to hear you guys' opinions on that.
I think that human nature, we're never going to get past, right, the reality of human nature. Right. And humanity was created to be in community. Yep. And I think that this pandemic is also showing us that, right? That even, it doesn't matter what generation you're in, the longer we are away from one another, the more we're longing to be with one another.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And so human nature is just that. So as the generations become more tech based, right, then human nature says, I need touch. Yep. I need a community to be with. And so I think that churches have a great opportunity because that's what we major in.
Yeah.
Right. That's what separates us from any other institution, is that the church majors in community and, building community and relationships and doing life together. Right. That authenticity is so key. And then I want to say this too, even among the generation, kind of piggyback on what Reverend Talifaro had mentioned about the generations, or what both of you said about the generations. I think that the contemporary church has made an idol out of millennials.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're the only they're the only group that never ages.
Yeah.
Everybody, no, the oldest batch of millennials are 40 years old.
Yeah.
Right.
And these folks that are graduating college and coming into ministry are a whole new generation. And we're still saying, what are we going to do with the millenniums?
Right.
No millenniums. But I think that it's important too, that millennials begin to embrace and be to Generation Z, yes, and younger what they have cried out for a whole 20 years or so, right? Because it's kind of been the same conversation under different names. It was, the hip hop generation is kind of how it started out. And then next thing, it was like this millennial thing. But now it's time to start shifting and creating the kind of faith community that you wanted someone to create, right, for you and in those spaces too. But I think, again, we're not going to get over human nature. And human nature desires gathering. So I think that this is a challenge now, but also a great opportunity for the church.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As long as we don't, like back in the 90s, every youth ministry was a Joshua generation. As long as we don't go back to that name, right. Every group was Joshua generation.
Oh, and this part too, maybe the new paradigm is, instead of age-based separate ministry, maybe now is the time to bring everybody together. And no longer, because we know through studies, right? We read and we read the statistics, and we know that kids who aren't in the sanctuary are not adults in the sanctuary, right? They're not an adult in the sanctuary as kids. They will not just kind of turn that light on. But maybe the separate age group kind of ministry has been what has been a crutch or a method for the church not to change, right? Because here we get to stay the same. And those things that you want, you can go over there and do them. And then what happens? We never have to change. But what if we decided in our churches that no, we're going to make the adjustment so that we can minister to the total person, right? In one place. And we're going to make the changes that need to be changed so that we are developing community and relationships that are also intergenerational. I'm finding in my context that younger people do want to be connected to older people.
Yeah. And you have to be intentional about doing that. Like I remember before it was, some churches may do it, may not. The kids were in the worship part. When it came to the word, they took them downstairs to do the activities to work where they can get it. I think you have to be intentional about, you're right, making that adjustment where people can, of all age groups, get what they need in the same house. So that's good. Anybody else want to join on that one?
I'll just say, I just think that's a valid point because so often when we compartmentalize people, we compartmentalize thoughts and ideas and perspectives. And you'd be surprised when you bring everybody together, you'll have that intergenerational exposure. Because now I begin to understand this generation. Now I begin to understand that the old folks ain't so old anymore. They dealt with the same stuff that I dealt with, or the young folks, they're not too far removed from what I went through. So I think that's a very valid point. And I think if we would really embody that and implement that, we will see a shift and a turning of this ship that we call the church.
Oh, Pastor Mario.
Yeah. Man, there's so much to say. It's so good. I mean, this is what I love. This is why I'm getting my doctorate in leadership. Like, I love this, and I may steal some of the things you said. I will cite you accordingly, Doctor and Rev. So don't worry about that. But yeah, the thing that keeps coming back to me just listening to everybody is Jesus said, "Do not stop the kids from coming to me."
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, and we talked about this, Pastor Nick, at the last Issachar, about how we have to stop separating in generations. Now, that's not meaning that there isn't a time where they can get age-appropriate teaching and community, but the church, at some point, you should have the opportunity for young, middle, and older together, because the only way you learn how to worship, you learn how to sit and listen to a word is by it being modeled for you. Mm-hmm. And if we think that one day you just wake up when you're 25 and you know how to, sit in a service and listen, that doesn't happen. All behavior is learned behavior. Yeah. And if there's behaviors we don't like in our kids and the next generation, they learned it from somewhere. And if there's behaviors we want them to learn, then we have to model that for them. And I just think, I agree wholeheartedly. We've got to begin to model that community in the church, not just talk about it again, but actually model it so that the next generation can learn and the older generations can continue to learn. Because, mentorship and development can go both ways. And I think, if we don't have those three generations together, then we're missing out on the fullness of God.
Absolutely. It's intentional. We have, as Pastor Mario said, we have age appropriate stuff on Sundays and Wednesdays, and we also have our group gatherings too. So there is that community and progressing them from one age group to the next, whether it's on a Tuesday night, Friday night, whatever day, Wednesday, Sunday, progressing them through. But I remember talking to a millennial, and they were like, we want to do some more millennial stuff. And I said, because they wanted to basically change everything to meet their age group. I said, you really want us to change the whole entire church? That one thing that bugs me, Pastor Daniel, you were so right about this. For a while, we saw churches changing everything they did to fit one age group. And the seniors no longer felt connected because they were trying to do everything to fit the millennial group.
Yeah.
And it takes some intentionality to understand that the young folk have to understand the worship style of the older understand the worship style of the younger. And that takes time, intentionality, and teaching. Where, I grew up on hymns, so I love them. But when we have team service, we ain't singing hymns every time we come together. They don't. Precious Lord ain't working with them. Right. It's not. So it is a lot of give and take and sacrifice. And I think here it is. I think sometimes we make our style of worship God rather than God actually being God.
So good.
If it's not my song, if it's not my style, I can't get with it. When the reality is not always about how we're worshiping, it's who we're worshiping, whether it's a millennial style, senior style, or whatever. But we've somehow made our traditional way of worship, that's more our savior than anything.
Right.
And I think that's so it takes some tension out. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right. And I don't think that we are authentically being community if everyone is not being represented. Right. I teach our seniors every Thursday. For the last 2 years, I have taught our senior Bible study, and I'm a junior senior, honorary senior, right? But I learned most of them are not seminary. None of them are seminary trained, right? They know technology now because we were intentional about having younger people walk them through setting up Facebook pages and Twitter, Instagram. You know, when we had to go virtual, people were like, "Well, what about the seniors?" Our seniors was like, "I give on the Givelify, right? I just push the button and boom, there it is, right?" But they teach me so much about God.
Yep.
And I grew up in the church that I serve. So even some of the things that I do now that my peers are like, "Well, where did you learn that?" I'm like, because I was 5 and 6 at the prayer meeting with these people, right? And they taught me to pray. They taught me to have faith. They taught me that I had a voice, right? And that I should use that voice and all of that. And so we are not authentically the church if people are absent from our gathering or from those spaces, because there's things that every generation can learn from one another.
That's so good.
That's good.
I'll say one more thing is it's amazing as Pastor Nick, you were talking about growing up on hymns. You know, I began to reflect on my childhood and thinking about when I was growing up, we had children's church, and we would go to children's church during that time and different things of that nature. But my fondest memories, and I don't want to sound like super old, but my fondest memories were when I was in the regular church with everybody else. And to show you how much of an impact that had on my life, I remember in 2006 when my mother passed away, I was at the cemetery. We were about to walk away. No other song popped in my head but "Great Is Thy Faithfulness." Right. No other song. No Kirk Franklin song, no John P. Key song, no youth appropriate song, but something that would sustain me, that I would not have heard in children's church, but I only would have heard being around the community of believers who were way older than me that could provide the narrative to say, "Baby, this is a song that's going to get you through."
Right.
And it was in the fell clutch of circumstance that it did.
My God.
Awesome.
Then you think about this, that what about collaborating, right? That we can take the old songs, and so the seniors say, "Hey, I got the lyrics," and the younger people saying, I have the beat, right? Yeah. You know, we can be creative in worship, but if we're all in our own separate corners, right? Then the richness of intergenerational connectivity is lost.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Pastor Mary, you want to share on this? We're almost 8 o'clock. Anything else you want to share on this?
No, I mean, it's just so good, and I'm glad that you're having this conversation. You know, with especially thinking about the younger generation, Barna came out with a study, and I think they called it, you know, "Faith for Exiles: Living in Digital Babylon." And I think it's important for us to realize again that, and I think somebody already said it, is that just because the young people are "quote unquote" more connected online, there's still that disconnect offline. And I think, you know, sitting with the older saints, hearing their testimony, watching their faith, listening to their journey. Listen, if you're single and you want to know what it takes to have 50 years of great marriage, then go find that senior couple in your church and take them out to lunch, you know, whenever you can, or, you know, do a Zoom call right now with them and just, you know, hear their story. If you want to know what it takes to be, you know, long ministerial integrity of a pastor, go sit with, Reverend Brown, go sit with someone older in your church. And if you want to know what's going on in the younger generation, the older generation, go sit with somebody younger, because it's in our stories, it's in our testimonies that we learn what to do, and even sometimes more importantly, what not to do.
Yeah.
And so I just think that recapturing of the community is really key. And I think this pandemic, like it's been said before, is really exposing that right now for the church.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's good. So we just got to be intentional about it. I know we began years ago very intentional about making sure even our young folk are up on the pulpit praying, reading scripture, all that stuff, to show that involvement. But it's intentional. It's 8 o'clock, y'all. I don't want to keep everybody too long. I thank y'all so much for coming on. Y'all's dropping some bombs tonight. We got to do this again sometime soon. I really appreciate you guys so much for coming on just to talk with us and rap about church.
Thank you for inviting us.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for having us and letting us be on your platform. And the church and the bishop.
Yeah. The crazy thing is, any other time, if this pandemic never happened, we probably would never had this panel.
Yeah.
Right.
And I hate to say it like that, but it literally is true.
Mm-hmm.
It's given us time to connect with people in a different way, but also to be able to have some discussions too. So I don't know what the church is going to look like when we come out of this. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be the same, but there's going to be some new norms, some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some way, shape, or form, there's going to be some new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So if all hearts and minds are clear, thank you guys for coming to join us today.
Thank you.
We love you guys. We appreciate you. Talk to y'all soon.